Hi everyone, this is Achint Singh from Walson Education. We are a peer-to-peer college consulting, advisory and essay editing firm. And in this series of videos, we will be bringing for you interviews with the most successful applicants, international and domestic, to universities in the United States of America, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, really everywhere. And in today's video, we are talking with someone called Subarghya Das, an old friend of mine, someone I've known for more than 5 to 7 years now. Brilliant personality, great guy, got into an Ivy, couple of other great schools as well. Has great insight into the process. So without further ado, let's hear from Subarghya.
Thank you for being here, Subarghya. You want to start things
Yes,
off with maybe
yes.
a short
Very glad
introduction
to be
about
here.
yourself?
My name is Subarghya. I went to Lamont near Calcutta. I studied in the ISC board. I had science and computer as my subjects in 11 and 12. Uh, I am an American citizen by birth, and yeah, that about
Lucky
wraps it up. That
guy.
about wraps it up. Yes,
And
but the
what
luck pays
about,
off.
of course, I mean, so how many years before, like, in grade 10 or 11, or when did you start thinking about college and decide that, you wanted to go to America? Walk us through the thought process before it all started.
So I would say I'm one of the lucky ones. College was on my mind since like 2010 when we went to drop my brother off at college. So he went
Okay.
to Cornell and I'm going to Cornell. That should tell you something about the process. Uh, I think when I went to university in 2010, I was obviously very young, but it got stuck in my head that the kids here are pretty talented, and to be at par with these kids, you better start early and you better have a pretty good idea of what you want to do. But I mean, I still fucked around. I mean, I didn't take shit seriously until like class 10, but I was definitely trying to still participate outside the classroom from class 8 onwards itself, because I mean that's happened naturally, but if it doesn't happen to you naturally, I would really suggest that you try and push yourself outside the classroom, because considering the fact that we're from an Asian country, and at least what I saw there was the Asians in these schools are usually people who've done something besides just grades. Because Asian countries are known for academic prowess. So you can have a lot of people who have very, very good SAT scores and very, very good grades. But that's where the struggle is. You got to stand out beyond that, and I think that's what I considered really early on, which helped out.
So,
So yeah, that's what I would say.
did you apply only to the US, or were you also, applying to other places and trying maybe UK,
So
Canada?
yeah, so I definitely considered UK and Canada initially, along with the States, but I kind of realized that the United States application process is a mouthful, and I didn't think I could handle anything else besides that. So I kind of backed out of UK and Canada. And there was also another thing, I'll be very honest. I am, see, compared to the rest of the applicants from our school, I was not the best academically. So applying to places like the UK and Canada where they check just academics, I knew I would have a definite disadvantage. So a place where America, where it's more holistic, I knew I had certain advantages that my friends did not. So that's why I chose the US. But yeah.
And which universities did you end up applying to? Did you send an early decision, early action? Did you do any of that stuff?
So my ED was Cornell, and
Okay.
my obviously was Cornell, because let's be very honest, for someone like me with above average academics and I would say good extracurriculars, getting into an Ivy League as an international, because I was put into the international pool as I found out because I had an
Of course.
international education. Getting into an Ivy League was very basically no chance. The idea that I would get in was kind of out of my mind after application. But what I kind of considered was that, how should I put this? That I wanted to, you know, try and do something that would make me stand out. But yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I would say. Kind of lost my train of thought there. But
That's okay.
yes, I think. But yes, I think I think. Wait, what was your question again, please? I'm completely lost. What was your question again?
Which universities did you actually end up applying to? Like
Okay,
around how
so I
many?
had So I had around initially I had around 30 universities on my list. But
Wow.
after a point I realized 30 universities is not gonna happen. And but I would say you should apply to as many as possible, because considering how much of a crapshoot the admissions process is, you should really try and maximize your chances. But you should also not stretch yourself so thin that your each of your separate applications are like they're not very good. And so I ended up applying to about 12, out of which I got into 7. And
Wow.
yeah, that was but all of them in
Pretty
the
awesome,
states.
man. It's a
And
60% ratio. It's pretty awesome. So you
hmm,
got into, you
one thing I'd
mentioned
like to
Cornell.
mention is,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, so one thing I'd like to mention before you move on to the next question, I'm so sorry to cut you off. But one thing I'd like to mention is you should keep your options open. So when I was considering college, I considered colleges which were way out of my league. And I also considered colleges which were way, way, way within my league. So you want to have options on both sides. So you want stuff that is at par with you, but also out of your league and also below your league. So that way you have options. Because otherwise, you don't want to be the guy who ends up applying to only very, very good schools and then not getting into any one of them. And then all of a sudden the confidence goes out the window and you realize you're kind of fucked. So
Like a good friend
yeah,
of mine, we
that's
all
what I would
know.
say. Yes, yes, of course. I was very unfortunate for him. I was very unfortunate.
Yeah. So, how many which universities did you get into? Which were your top places, and how did you decide upon Cornell?
So so I applied to both. So I am a fine art major after all. I'm a fine art and economics major, like as of
Okay.
now at Cornell. But I knew that I would apply for fine art because I think it's the strongest part of my application, and it builds the most cohesive story. So art with economics builds a very interdisciplinary story, which fits perfectly into what I've been doing throughout high school. So I did want to apply to art schools, but I also wanted to apply to universities where I knew that I could pursue both subjects, and therefore I could sell both subjects and try and get in for both. So I applied to. So my best offers from art schools were I got the presidential scholarship at Pratt Institute. I had an offer from SAIC, and I got waitlisted at RISD, which was pretty unfortunate. And besides art schools, I got into UC Berkeley, I got into Cornell, and after that I think I got into UWash, I got into some other very generic places. OSU, Case Western gave me a pretty good scholarship, but Case Western was there. And yeah, that I would say is my best offers, the one I really was
Hmm.
considering.
Pretty awesome, man. So, and
Thank
this
you.
was something I was supposed to ask you in the beginning. I totally forgot. What were your stats like? Yeah, like some of your marks, extracurriculars, your SED stuff like that.
Yes, like I said, my grades were we were this average or above average. I'll be very honest. I was not the best
It's
science
okay.
student, but besides that, I knew that I would have to play to my strengths. So I gave the SAT thrice, and I ended up with a 1510, which is not very good, but it's the best I think I could manage with on my third
Pretty great.
attempt.
It's pretty great.
But I mean, yeah, a 1500 plus means it's good. I mean, I was happy, but I mean, looking at you, I was also pretty jealous. I won't lie. Uh,
You
so
know,
besides that,
won the
those were
battle,
my
lost
stats.
the
So
war.
academics in
For
school.
for everyone who's listening right now, I also applied to Cornell early decision. This fucker ended up getting in after getting deferred. I was rejected out of hand. Please continue.
Another one of our friends was deferred, and I don't think we took it too well.
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, moving. So I think yeah, that about wraps up my stats. I think I focused more on, you know, my stuff outside the classroom. So like I talked about, let's say in school, I talked about stuff like debate, clubs, like works in the club. So I would say one thing I realized about school clubs is that you can be a part of many clubs, but if you have nothing to talk about within those clubs, you basically have done nothing. So I talked about so I try to build a story and I try to make them tangents off my main part of my application, which is art. So in like the science club, I talked about how I used my artistic capabilities and sketching capabilities to design a rover with an aerospace engineer who is Arush Malik. And in the Heritage Club, I talked about how I worked in the school museum to restore one of their very old models. So it was my artwork also being incorporated into the heritage aspect of the Heritage Club. Then the art club itself, I was a core committee member, and I think that was pretty obvious. Art and art club goes together pretty well. And so I tried to explore the fact that I imparted what I learned through the artistic process. And keep in mind, I had no professional training. So when I was competing with other kids who were applying to art school, I didn't have 4 years of art school training in high school. I had 2 years of art ISC, which is very, very basic work.
Crap.
So that was obviously, like I said, it was a setback, but I mean, I had to figure something a way around it. And I think mentioning that and then presenting my portfolio really, sets the bar low enough for me to break through the bar. So, I mean, that worked out
Good
pretty well.
man.
And
That
then
sounds
I
like
think
a
one of the
sexy
most
application.
unique aspects of the club that I talked about.
Yeah.
No, I think one of the most unique parts of my application was, so one thing I consistently try to do throughout my app was be unique and like talk about stuff which I know not many people can talk about. So like my last club was the Hindi club, and I talked about how as a I was the first Bengali core committee member of the Hindi club in its existence, and the whole process of going through that, I think, was a very unique process, and I gave my perspective on the matter, and I think that was a pretty interesting part. So yeah,
So enough about
I
how
mean,
you
but
succeeded.
I could also talk about my
Uh,
issues outside the classroom. I mean, outside the
uh,
school also, if you want to. But
of course, please do, please do. We all want to learn.
so I mean, so outside the classroom, I also wanted to keep it unique. So I talked about my contributions. So I wanted to bring community building somewhere into this, and I talked about the community which was I think closest to my heart at that point, which was the Kolkata hip hop community, the Kolkata hip hop scene rather. And not many people can talk about a hip hop scene in their application. And it honestly at that point it wasn't very growing in Bengal. And I tried to be as big a part of it as I could. So I was part of the beatbox and the graffiti culture in the hip hop scene. And we went on to create the Kolkata beatbox community, and we had our first championship, state level championship in I think 2018. And the whole process of going through that. When you talk about something like beatboxing, it's not something everyone talks about, and I think that really helped me paint a very good picture. And talking about graffiti in America is illegal, so that was like I tread very lightly, but I was also explored the fact that what I did in my art was not like mediums I was working with in art wasn't something a lot of people explore, or at least that's what I thought. And so stuff like graffiti, stuff like paper craft, paper sculpture, all this stuff. So yeah, I would say that's about it. That's about it.
So you do beatbox pretty well too, don't you?
Do I do? I'm sorry.
Beatbox pretty well too, don't you?
Yes, I yes, I have won a few competitions. Yes.
So could we hear maybe a small snippet,
I don't know.
if
I don't
you're
know
comfortable? I
how
mean,
well it'll come across. So I mean, let me give you a minute tutorial. So I wrote my common up essay about this actually. I wrote an
okay,
essay about the word buttercup. Now the buttercup word is essentially introduction to beatboxing. Buttercup,
okay,
if you break it down to the consonants, is butterka, and the butterka is the three basic beats for beatboxing. So the ba is the ka is k, and the ka is so buttercup,
wow,
and from there you can go and make a beat like. So that's how you. That's
wow,
what I wrote about in my common app essay,
pretty
and
unique, man.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I was trying to sell the unique factor more than anything.
You're a unique guy.
I mean, I think one of the cheeky moves I think I pulled and got away with was in the LOR. So now, me not being academically the best, I knew my LOR won't be someone like Arush or Mayur, who for context here are the school toppers in science at least. So in my LORs, I quickly within the first paragraph shifted to topics outside the classroom. So in my my art LOR was pretty chilled out. In my art LOR, I could like the teacher could write about stuff like me being one of the best artists she's seen in quite a while in the school. And I mean that holds true, and I had that advantage because the Martinia isn't exactly known for its art culture. And for English, I knew that I wasn't the English topper in class, so I definitely had to bring another aspect into this. So I went to a teacher who also happened to be a teacher who's seen me at the podium debating for Interhouse. So he talked about how my debating skills bled into my work ethic in class where I talked about literature. Or how this guy was also in charge of the Hindi club at some point. So he talked about my culture there. So quite quickly throughout the LOR, it went from just being about academics to me, what kind of student I am and my work ethic, to basically my extracurriculars again. So I think that was one thing that I don't know why it took me that long to come up with, but once I did come up with it, I was pretty proud I used that move and went down that route. But yeah.
So that sort of gives the impression that what's shown in your application most that you're a real person, like, as compared to maybe everyone else who's just mechanically going through the motions, getting 100, doing MU and becoming president, things like that. You were a real
Oh yeah,
individual
I don't
personality.
I don't mean to shit on MUN, but MUN
No,
is
let's
the
shit on
most
everyone. Come
common
on.
easily in your no MUN. So currently at Cornell, I have friends who are incredibly talented munners. But at the end of the
Of course.
day, you have like 120 characters to talk about an extracurricular, and within those 120 characters, you can't really claim as much. MUNs are extremely common, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing that it's common. I'm not saying you might be a very, very talented manner, but honestly, very hard to express how talented you are in those 120 characters. That's why I call it very underrated. And I think it's very, actually, I call it very overrated. And I think it's too common for you to mention somewhere very high on your list. But yeah.
So enough about your strengths here. Let's talk about what were perhaps some of the weaknesses in your application. Maybe a reason, you think you didn't get into another school you really wanted to get into, if that happened at all.
Yes, I was rejected by all the other Ivies, so definitely something lacking. Uh, so I would say it's obvious for me. It was my academics. I probably should have worked harder on my grades in school. I mean, besides that, I don't think I could have done anything better considering my circumstances, considering my like setbacks and all that stuff. Like considering I say I live 1 hour away from school, so staying back after school was a hassle. And I have asthma and I have an issue with my knee, so I couldn't talk about athletics, which is one very big thing people talk about. So guys like Paranjay, who's a school basketball player, he could talk about that aspect of his life, which I just couldn't because I just had a big a big hole there and nothing to talk about there. So I would say, yeah, my grades. I should have worked harder in class and brought up my grades.
But I mean, you're still going to
So yeah, that's what
the place I wanted to go
yes,
to.
yes, I am. But I
So
mean, in all
when we
honesty,
were
we all
talking
know
about, so
fitting
I
in
was
will be
talking to
harder
my,
when
yeah,
everybody else is very, very good at stuff.
my God. So I was talking to, the couple of people I'm doing this with about who we are interviewing, what we're doing. And when we started talking about you, I was like, I don't want to talk to that fucker. He took away my acceptance. But I mean, credit where it's due. Pretty
No,
great
I
guy.
mean, see, the process is very, very cutthroat. I won't lie.
Of course.
Jealousy is gonna happen. It happened to me. I'll be very honest. I was jealous of
Not jealous of you,
your
man. I love you.
stat score and how. So, no, no. See, jealousy is common, but I mean, you have to rise above it. I feel jealous of some of my friends who got into very good universities, but at the end of the day, I'm also very, very glad for them. I would rather have them get in than anyone else. So, yeah, it's a push pull thing. It's like a fight within yourself that you just get used to after the whole season is over. And when the college application season is finally over and the decisions are out, you start questioning whether you should have felt this ill towards someone over a college application. So yeah.
Uh, and so when it comes to financial aid and scholarships, I mean, what was that process like?
Hmm.
How did you go through that?
Yeah, I'm having a bit of connection issues. You can
Yeah,
still hear
and
me, right?
my actually my earphones are not getting connected properly. Just give me a second.
Sure, sure. Hmm. Take your time.
Yeah, I think it's better now. Okay.
Yeah. So I was pretty lucky. I did not have to apply for financial aid. Although I do plan on applying for financial aid next year. I think financial aid, at least for the states, it is a very, very big setback. As an international student, if you apply for fin aid, your chances go down even lower. So I was lucky enough to not have to take that risk, and I think it worked out in the end. So I did not apply for financial aid anywhere. As for scholarship, I applied to as many scholarships as at many universities as I could. Whatever, even if it was way out of my league, I went for it. I went full throttle, and I think it paid off in some cases because at places like Case Western and Pratt, I managed to get pretty high scholarships. So yeah.
And so for people who are applying this year, I mean, everyone is scouring the internet for advice, and everywhere, you don't get really very good advice. Everyone says it's a crapshoot, it's vague, it's all of that. But having been through the process, we kind of know different, don't we? We know that there are things you can do to, sort of increase your chances. I want to get your take on that and on the essays and how important they are.
So I would say, first of all, don't get emotionally invested in your application to one school which you really like. I did, does not help.
Okay.
So it hurts. Okay, like it hurts to get rejected by a college which you think is the perfect college for you. So when people ask me what is my dream school, I would say my dream school is wherever I get in. Because honestly, if you are too invested in a college, like in an application, it will hurt, and it will hurt real bad to the point where you start doubting your own capabilities. Okay, and that's a very, very bad phase to go through. So yeah, college applications, at least in the undergraduate process, is an absolute crapshoot. For graduate level, it's much easier. At least that's what I hear from seniors. It's for example, in grad school, if you have certain stats and you've done certain things in college, you're almost guaranteed an acceptance into a very good college, right? For undergraduate, that's not the case. You can have a 1698% in your board examinations, but you can still get rejected because that's just how it is. It's very unpredictable, and that's why I would say don't judge yourself based on where you get in. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but before Ivy Day, my best offer was from Case Western. Yeah, I was considering Case Western. So the jump from Case Western to Cornell is a pretty big jump. So I was already in the
No offense
mindset
to
that
Case
I'm
Western.
okay to go wherever I get in. And I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
I'm saying no offense to Case Western people. If you're out there,
Yeah, no offense to Case Western. Case Western is a damn good school. I mean,
yeah,
Case Western is where the founder of Gmail is from. So I mean, it's a very good school.
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I do because I checked out everything about the university to try and make me feel good about myself. So, but yeah.
And Subarghya, what
And
else?
also, one thing I would like to
Yeah,
address is,
please.
hmm?
No, go
Yes,
on.
one thing I would like to say is when it comes to when it comes to prestige ranking of a university, and I would say at after a certain point in like when it comes to colleges, after a certain point, all colleges are offering you the same kind of academics with the same kind of research facilities and the same kind of quality professors. What differs is that the prestige pays off. So the chop of a very good school will help you in whatever industry you go into, but that's also industry specific. So let's say engineering. So my mom and dad and my brother are engineers, and they have told me time and time again, your university will not make a difference as to where you get a job. It honestly matters on what projects you work on and what kind of student you are and how capable you are for the job. But for let's say something like finance, so if I go into investment banking today, then they will definitely care about which university I graduated from because that's where prestige starts to matter. There's also the fact that uh, which I think the same factor which makes IITs very, very famous and very, very good. It's that you are surrounded by people who are very, very high caliber people. So usually a certain so the average student at let's say a mid-tier college is not as smart as the average student at a very, very good school. So your surroundings, if you have very, very competitive surrounding and you have a very intelligent surrounding, you also tend to push yourself. But and that also bleeds over to networking. Your network pays off, and it always does. And your network is more likely to be very strong if you go to an Ivy League school where you have either very, very rich kids or very, very smart kids. So or both. And so that's my point.
So what else matters? I mean, trying to get into college specifically, we talked about extracurriculars, we've talked about scores, we've talked about everything. But is there anything else which matters? Is, does being a brown Asian
Oh yeah,
disadvantage you?
we can no, we can talk about the startup addiction. Everyone, no offense to you, but I think for the college application process, I realized everyone has some sort of startup, and I also had some startup ideas in mind, and my brother shat on them to the extent I realized colleges will realize that as an 18-year-old kid, you can only have startups that are so successful. And most of the times they aren't. Most of the times, if I were to be honest, the startup I had in mind to create, it was going to be a more hyped up version of the same old idea, and I knew that that startup wouldn't actually continue after I got into college. It would just be a 3-month thing which I could write about and try and flex. So I tried to go down a different route. I started working at this place called the Tiljala Society for Human and Educational Development. Tiljala Shed is their acronym. Tiljala Shed is one of Kolkata's biggest NGOs and one of Kolkata's oldest NGOs. They've been around for quite a while now. And they essentially try and provide housing, healthcare, food, and loans for and employment for women and children from the Topshia region who are underprivileged. So I worked with them, and to the point where I was pitching them ideas about products I had in mind, and I was also pitching them ideas about a certain business we wanted to do. And this, I think, what set me apart was I was already working with an institution that had a reputation, had a name for itself. I wasn't doing so. I wasn't like building a startup from scratch, which is all honestly impossible at our age, considering our all the other things that are going on in our
And it
life.
takes time.
So I think that's yeah, it that I think that's what sold my story more. I was working at this place for 3 years, and I worked to the point that I was pitching to some very, very important people. Like I pitched to the US Consul General.
Wow.
I pitched to some important people from the British Embassy, from the German Embassy, and we received like some good amount of money from one of these consulates, which I cannot name for reasons. But we received some good money from one of these consulates, and we had the seed capital to go ahead and start our business. Our business was a very simple one. We hired women who were either wanting to pay their way through college or women who were widows and wanted to make a living. And we had like a soap and candle making business, a very simple business. But putting it together and what it taught me about these people and employing people like this and the whole community, because we had like a lawyer on our side who had to like make contracts for these people to sign, and these people didn't know how to sign. They was like thumbprint contracts because they were uneducated people. So the whole process of figuring that out, and this guy was a lawyer, he was an advocate who went through the Tiljala Shed process. He was a kid who grew up in the slums and then went on to become a lawyer. So he had a lot of emotional investment in the company. So working with these people really, you know, gave me a lot to talk about. And I think it was honestly a more enriching experience. So yeah.
Guys, this is what an Ivy Leaguer sounds like.
No, no, also there were some very good flexes. I won't lie. These people got me to places like the Bengal Entrepreneurship Summit to give speeches and shit. So that kind of stuff does look very good on your application. I will not lie. So yeah, I think it was both a rewarding process and it also looked very good on the application. Because in all honesty, I won't think anyone would push themselves to this extent just out of the goodness of their heart, unless you're a very, very good person.
Like me.
So there is a bit of shallowness involved. Yeah, there is a bit of no offense. There's a bit of shallowness involved. You said it, I didn't. So there is definitely a bit of shallowness involved, which does push you to do things you don't want to. But I
You
mean,
do
you
what
have
you
to
gotta do.
build a story. Yeah, you build a story that's believable. You don't so you don't have a startup which sounds like you exist only as a website and as an Instagram page. I had work which existed as a community, and I think that's what really paid off. So yeah. Anything
Subarghya,
else?
before we wrap up, I want to get some final words of golden insight and advice from you for anyone who might be listening for how
Sure.
they can get into a place like you've gotten into.
I cannot hear the last part of your question.
Like how they can get into a place that you got into, golden insight into the process. A few words of advice, a few words of
Oh,
guidance.
there is no golden insight. This admissions process a lottery ticket. I got lucky. Very honestly, I got lucky. There's a lot of people out there who had better applications than me. A lot of people out there who had worse applications than me. Some of them got in, some of them didn't. It's honestly very hard to predict where you'll get in, and it obviously because you just submit your application, give it your best, and then forget about it. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, fine. So I mean, yeah, that's what I would say.
And
It's
what about seeking the
absolutely
help of
random.
an outside
There
counsel?
is
Does that help?
Oh, I would definitely say so. It does. I would say having someone. So I would say if you can afford a counselor and if you can afford to apply to many schools, go for it. Absolutely go for it. Get a tutor for your SAT. It helps. I thought I would prepare for it by myself. It did not work out. And yeah, get a counselor. Get a decent counselor, but don't get an expensive counselor. We have a certain counselor here in Calcutta who does group sessions, and he takes twice the money my counselor took. And I honestly think that's not the kind of person I
We
would
saw
go
how
to.
that worked out.
But yeah, get a counselor for yourself if you can.
Multiple IV versus zero IV.
No, no. So yeah, see these people. So I obviously had a lot of advice from my brother himself because oh yeah, guys, I had a sibling legacy at Cornell. So please keep that in mind. My brother went to Cornell University and then I got into Cornell. So I
You're
definitely had
connected
certain
there. Don't be
advantages that
blind to
most
it.
people don't. But I mean, honestly, it's not as good as let's say my mother or father being from Cornell. But I also wouldn't say that he having been to Cornell was a disadvantage for me because it definitely wasn't. So yeah,
So, thank you for doing this, Subarghya. It was brilliant to be able to speak to you on this.
absolutely, man.
Hopefully, we
It
can
was great
collaborate
talking to
on
you.
something
It was
soon
great
again.
talking to you.
Take. So, guys, that was Subarghya Das. Brilliant, quirky guy. Wouldn't you agree? As I was alluding to earlier, we are a peer-to-peer college consulting and essay editing service. And if you want to, see more of these videos, more advisory videos, we have another couple of series coming up. Do subscribe, give a thumbs up to this video if you liked it. Click the bell icon to, never miss a notification. And if you want your own application reviewed, if you're looking for someone to help you with your application, if you need your essays edited, if you need any help whatsoever regarding your college application process to whichever country you're applying, wherever you're from, we really service everyone, everywhere. We have a great team, students and alumni of the best colleges across the world. Do drop us an email at walsoneducation@gmail.com. I am linking it down below, and let's talk about it. Let's start with a free consultation session and see if we can help you out in your own college journey in any shape, way, or form. Thank you. See you next week.